Hello, welcome to the Church360 Ledger webinar for checks and payees. Hi, my name is Rod Kiles and I am the Customer Onboarding Specialist for Concordia Technology Solutions. I've been with the company for a little bit over 15 years and I really appreciate my time here. You can reach me one of two ways. You can reach me via email at rod.kiles@cph.org. And you can also reach me by phone at 314-268-1315. I kindly ask that you mute your phones or microphones and type any questions you may have into the question window. I do answer those in the order that they are received, and I will answer any questions you have at the end of class. So this webinar is broken into three sections. So maybe more like four sections, but basically three sections. So we'll start out with the class overview where we will go through and discuss the things we're going to cover during this checks and payees webinar. Then once we're done with that, we have a few PowerPoint slides we'll go through to cover like the higher level points. Then we'll transition over into Church360 Ledger where we'll go through those tasks, adding in payees and showing you how to create checks and print those out. Then once we've done those tasks, we will return back to our PowerPoint presentation where we'll have our question and answer session. So let's go ahead and go through the class overview here. So we're going to start out by going through a couple slides of conventions, just to lay a little bit of groundwork there. Then we'll go through the definition of a payee, and we'll show entering in payees as well. Then there's checks and check printing. So we'll show you how to enter in checks. We'll do like a payroll check, and then we'll do like paying a vendor. So we'll show checks, and then we'll show how to print checks, and we'll show each one of those steps. Then we'll also discuss transaction management. So we'll show how to void a transaction and how to create a recurring transaction. We'll show those as well. Then once we get done with all of these actions, we'll view the general ledger report, so we'll actually be able to see the transactions that we've added into the system. We'll be able to report on those. Then we'll have our question and answer session. So let's go ahead and if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started. So when it comes to conventions, inside of Church360 Ledger, it is based on fund accounting with dual entry bookkeeping. So every single account is going to be inside of a fund or a book. And anytime you create a transaction, it's at least going to have two line items. So when we're dealing with checks, you're mostly dealing with your bank account and dealing with expense accounts. So there'll always be two line items, dual entry bookkeeping. Every single account will belong to a book. Most churches will just have one single book. So most churches will just have the church set of books, but you also can have more than one book. So it could be a situation where you have a daycare, or you may have a cemetery or a thrift shop, or you may have some other entity that you keep track of. But that would actually be a separate book. Every single transaction must have two line items, one being a debit and one being a credit. And the actual credit and debit chart, I didn't include that in this presentation, but I did add a handout to the GoToWebinar control panel that's typically on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can open up that handout. It's the one for transactions, so it'll have the transactions that I'm going to show here, plus the other transaction types as well. But the debits and credits chart is in there. So if you wanted to see that chart, you can open up the handout. Then there are transaction conventions as well. So the previous conventions were related to the software. These are related just to transactions. So there's similarities between all transactions. Every transaction must have a date. So when you enter that transaction in, you can set the date for that transaction to apply to your balances. Every transaction has the option of including a descriptive memo. So anytime you enter in that transaction, you can add additional text that will help you remember what this transaction was for. And typically that's used when dealing with journal entries or transfers, so checks and deposits are pretty straightforward. Every transaction will have a minimum of 2 line items. We were talking earlier about that being part of fund accounting. So whenever you create these transactions, guaranteed to at least have a credit and debit on those transactions. And the debits and credits must balance on all transactions. So we're going to be entering in a payroll check here in just a little bit, and when we get done and go down to the bottom, we'll be able to tell that the credits and debits match. So that's critically important there. So what are payees? So anytime that we create a transaction to pay somebody, we're going to attach a payee to this person. And a payee is going to be any person, company, or organization who receives a check, payment, or other disbursement of money from the congregation. So this would include employees. So inside of Church360 Ledger, you're going to have a list of payees, and these are just going to be your people, your company or organizations that you're going to send out payments to. So after payees, we have a description of checks, and checks allow users to print checks or record handwritten checks. So when we're dealing with checks, you're going to be recording payments that go to your payees, so out to your employees or out to your vendors or even utilities. So they're used for paying payroll, and they're used for paying your church bills. And with Church360 Ledger, you do have the ability to print laser checks or inkjet checks, and those can be ordered from formsplusinc.com. So and I think when you order your first set, they do give you a slight discount on that. But we have tested the software with these Forms Plus INC checks, and they work really good. They are the preferred vendor for Church360 Ledger, and they work. They do work really well there. So you can use a different check form as long as it matches up. But if it doesn't match up, then you would need to go with the Forms Plus INC checks. So. Let's go ahead and let's switch over to Church360 Ledger and go ahead and log in. There's one more slide, but that one's covering voiding. We'll cover that one here in just a second. So I went ahead and switched screens, and everyone should be able to see my demo.360ledger.com screen here. And demo is just the subdomain for the site that we're using here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in and type in my password here. If for some reason you forget your password, you can click the Forgot Your Password link, type in the email address that you have your login tied to, and receive a reset email. So clicking on the link in that reset email will just take you back to the site where you can fix your password or enter in a new correct password. So I'm going to go ahead and click Sign In. And that's going to go ahead and log me into the software. And whenever you log into the software, you'll notice across the top that you're going to have a main menu bar. And recently that menu bar has changed just a little bit. The actions are all still there, but the logos and a couple of the icons switched positions. So you still have your orange $ here at the top. Then you have your book selector to the right of that. So if you have more than one book, you can switch between those books. To the right of that is going to be your print queue icon, which allows you to see which checks are waiting to be printed. Then there's your transaction generator. This will allow you to generate transactions. So there's a couple of transactions that you'll see in there. You'll see deposits that are pulled over from your offering batches from Church360 members, but you can also see your recurrent transactions. Those are going to be transactions that you enter into the system and you set them to reoccur on a specific date. So from this window, you can actually generate and create those transactions. They're set up either coming from Church360 members, or they're set up by the user to generate on a certain date. To the right of the Generate Transactions icon is going to be your Reports icon, where we'll go to generate our General Ledger report here in just a few minutes. To the right of the Reports icon is going to be your Settings gear, where you can make changes to your site settings. And to the right of that is going to be your Profile icon, which will allow you to change your user settings and to log out of your software when you're done using Church360 members, Church360 Ledger. Okay, so to add a payee into the system, what we're going to do is we're going to click the gear here at the upper right, and we're going to go down to Payees down at the bottom. And clicking on Payees will show us a list of all the payees that we have in the system. And from this view, you can see the different payees. You can filter to search for a payee. But also, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can add in a new payee. So the payee that I want to add in is going to be Jim's Snow Removal. So I'm going to click the Add a New One button down at the bottom. And I'm going to type in the name box Jim's Snow Removal. Then from there, I can click Submit. The only piece of information that's required is the name on the payee, or the name for the payee. If you're going to be printing checks, you're definitely going to want to enter in the street, city, state, and zip code. Now, the phone field and the notes field, those two are optional, so that's more for reference or for saving just in case you need it. So you can enter in phone and notes. The notes could be invoice numbers or just a note on the account that you want to remember the next time you need to contact them. So Jim's Snow Removal, let's say 123 4th Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63118. And then we could add in a phone number there in notes. Okay. Then once we have that information typed in here, we can click Submit, and then that will add our payee into the system. You'll notice when you hover over the payee that there's a little history link. That will allow you to drill into and see history about that payee. So I'm going to close my banner at the top, and I'm going to go up to our Ameren UE, our Ameren Electric account here, and click on History. And that will allow us to go in and see the credits and debits for the payments that have been paid out to this payee over a specific time period. So to review that information, I can simply go to this view and see it, but also I can go up to the date picker here at the upper right and select a different date range. So I could select 2015 if I wanted to, and then I could see the debits and credits for 2015. At this point, I could export the information to Excel, or I could send this information to a print view where I could print this information out. So I'm going to go back to Payees, and there's a couple other actions that we may want to consider inside of this view. If I have a payee in the system and I needed to make a change to the name, I can simply click on the name and it'll open up the inline editing where I can go in and make a change and update that information. So if I received an additional phone number and I wanted to add that number into the system, I could simply update that information and click Submit. If I have a payee that is no longer needed, I can find that payee. I can click on the circle minus here on the right hand side, and then I'll have either the choice of deactivate or I'll have the choice of delete. Now, the difference between the two is that if the payee has been used in the past, then you'll have the option for deactivate, and that's just going to deactivate the account so that you don't see it in your drop list when you're entering in transactions, or you don't see it when you're creating reports. You'll have the option for delete if you have a payee in the system that's never been used. So you can delete ones that haven't been used, but you can deactivate ones that have been used. So that's the difference between the two. Delete is going to completely eradicate it. Deactivate is going to be more of a hide option. So the reason why they don't allow you to delete payees that have been used with transactions is so that the history can be preserved and you can still have those transactions fully intact for review later on down the line if you needed to do some research. So once we have our payees in the system, the next thing that we'll want to do is create new transactions. And the transactions that we're going to do today, they're going to be checks. And we're going to start with the payroll check. No matter which view you're in, when you're inside the software, you're going to have this new transaction button available. So it's kind of universal. It's part of your main menu area. You'll have what's called the Omni bar, and you'll have the new transaction button. So if I click on New Transaction, that's going to give me a drop-down list, a tray here, where I can select the transaction that I want to enter into the system. And I'm going to click on Check, and that will allow me to enter a check into the system. If I accidentally select the wrong type of transaction, I can click on the transaction type and switch to a different type of transaction if I like. And if I want to close this window, there is a little X here at the upper right that will allow me to close the window. So let's go ahead and enter in our payroll check here. So for our sample transaction, let's say that this is payroll for March. Then here on the right hand side, we're going to go ahead and select the date of the payment. So let's say that we're going to pay them today. We could select any date that we wanted to here, but I'm going to use today's date. Then once I select the date, I'll go and select the payee, and we're going to pay Derek Woods here. So I'm going to type in the name and select the name from the drop list. Now when it comes to payees, you can enter a payee on the fly. So if you type in a variation of the name, the system is going to allow you to use that variation. But with that said, you want to make sure to use the payee that's in the system if it's available. You don't want Derek Woods and then Derek with a different spelling, D-E-R-R-I-C-K or something like that. You want to make sure that you're using the same payee so that all of the history is tied just to this payee. But the key thing about that is it does allow you to enter payees on the fly. So if you don't have them in the system, you can just type them in and it'll create them. You just want to be careful. So at this point, you can enter the check number. So if you know what the check number is going to be, you can just type in that check number. If you don't type the check number in right now, you will have the option to enter in the check number later on down the line. I would say typing in the check number is typical when you're doing a handwritten check, but it's not typical when you're going to be printing the checks out. You'll actually assign those when you're in the print queue to enter those in. So I'm going to take the check number out now, and since we're going to be printing checks here in just a moment. So from here, next I would select my asset account, and I'm going to select our unrestricted checking account, since that's where we're going to pay Derek from. Please note that when you're selecting your asset accounts that you can select a restricted fund as well. So if this person was being paid from a restricted fund, you could select that item, and you can select more than one asset. So if the person was getting paid from multiple restricted funds, you could select those. But in our situation, he's just getting paid out of the unrestricted checking here for Central Trust Banking. So here on the left-hand side, we would enter in the amount that Derek is going to take home. So this would be the net here. Then below that, we would fill in each one of the liabilities. So we're going to start out with our federal income tax. Then below that, we'll enter in our state income tax. followed by Social Security, Medicare, and Medicare. So Medicare is actually the last line item on our payroll check. Then we'll go over to the right-hand side where it says expense or liability, and this is where we should see the total of the check right here. So this is the gross amount. This is how much the church is going to pay. So at this point, what we would do is we would select our salary account, and we have one called staff salary, and we would enter that into the system. So at that point, we would review our check and make sure that everything is correct. We could scroll down and see the actual check, and it has, you know, the address and everything there. Payroll for March would be our memo, but then also we would see our debits and credits down here at the bottom. And if we have our debits and credits chart, we could, you know, do a comparison and see that each account is increasing and decreasing accordingly. So once we've reviewed our transaction, at that point we could click Save, and that will go ahead and save our transaction into the system. You'll notice that we'll have a banner across the top. Every check that's created goes into the print queue, and from there we'll have to make a decision on whether or not we're going to print the check or simply take the check out of the system. So that's how you would enter in a payroll check that you would print out on your laser check print or your laser check blanks. So let's go ahead and add in one more transaction here, and I'm going to enter this in as if we're writing a handwritten check to pay our natural gas bill. So I'm going to click on New Transaction and go down to check one more time and type in the memo. So let's say that this is the March gas bill, and select the date. Payee, I'm going to select Laclede Gas here. If I'm handwriting the check, I'll know what my check number is and I'll type that in. Then I'll select the bank account that the money is going to come out of, and say that our bill is $94.84 for the month of February, which we're now paying in March. Then I'd go over to expense, where I can select the expense account, and if I type in a couple characters, it'll automatically search through the drop list, and I can then select the account. From there, I'll go through and I will review everything once again, and I can click Save, and then that will save that transaction. And it'll give me the option to go to the print queue. To access the print queue, I can click the print queue link here in the green banner. I can also click the print queue icon here at the top. Before I do that, I do want to go back to our home screen where we'll see all of our transactions. And I'm just going to switch the date here to 2016 so that I can see those transactions we just entered in. And close that. Then here in our view now, we can see the checks that are the check that we wrote to Derek Woods, and we can also see the check that we wrote to, well, I guess the check that we're going to print, which would be writing, but the check that we entered for Derek Woods and the check that we entered here for Laclede Gas. So now we would go to our print queue here at the top, and for the Laclede Gas check, since we hand wrote that check, we're going to click the little checkbox here on the left-hand side, and we're just going to mark this check as printed. And what that does is it closes off that check, and it's going to remove that check from the print queue. So you won't be able to go back and make changes to that check at this point. So now what we would do is if we have a check that we want to print, we're going to check the little box here, and you probably want to notice that now up to the right of our check queue, it just says 1 because we removed that check. Anytime you look at the menu bar here at the top, it's going to show you the number of transactions that you have either in the print queue or the generate transaction queue there. So we're down to 1 right now. So at this point, if we want to print this check out, we can go to Print, and then that's going to show us what the check would look like. And we would just review it to make sure that everything is correct. Then we would click print at the top of our screen. That's going to bring up this modal window where I will make sure that my check numbers are correct. And if we have more than one check, we'll actually see each one of those checks, and we'll be able to make sure that those have the correct check numbers as well as this one. So say that this is 1235 here. Then when we print the check out, it should have that number. Now, at this point, we would take and we would load our check stock into the printer in the correct direction, facing up or down, facing forward or backwards there. Then we would click confirm, and that's going to take us to our print controls for our web browser. Once we know that we have the check stock loaded, we'll just click print, and that's going to send our check over to the printer. We'll wait for a second, wait for that to print, and go over to the printer and pull those off of the printer and take a look at them. If everything looks correct, then we'll simply click the Mark as Printed button. If it does not look correct, then we'll go to print and we'll print that check again. So ours check's printed out correctly, so I'm going to say Mark as Printed. Then I'm going to click confirm, and that will allow us to empty out our print queue. So once that's done, I'm going to go back to our home screen here, and on the left-hand side, we'll be able to click on the check to open it up, and we'll be able to see the check. And let me close this and go back to the orange dollar sign, and I think there should be a little icon here on the left-hand side now, but I'll look into that and take a look at that. So, okay, so once our transactions are in the system and we have them printed, the next thing we'll want to do is take a look at our general ledger report. So we can go to general ledger, and at this point, when the general ledger pulls up, it's typically going to pull for the current fiscal year, and you'll see all of your transactions, including the payees and the accounts. If we only want to see recent transactions or the transactions for March, we can use our date selector here at the upper right, and we could just click on the month of March just to see the transactions from March. If a transaction is voided, it is going to show in red like you're seeing here. If we only want to see the transactions for a single payee, we could click on the little triangle here, click all, and then we could select Derek Woods here. And then these would just be the transactions for Derek Woods. So he got paid on the 3rd and he got paid on the 9th. We can also, let me click all here. We can also do the same for account, where we could just show the transactions for the unrestricted checking. So that would be a way to review the information after we had it entered into the system. So let's go back and go to our orange dollar sign here, and if there was a mistake made with the transaction and I needed to void that transaction, I can click here on the left-hand side. You just want to make sure not to click on the hyperlinks. But I can click here on the left-hand side, and I can go down and void that transaction. And then voiding a transaction, let me switch over to my PowerPoint here. And voiding a transaction, what it does is it cancels the effect of a transaction. You're going to want to use the void button within the transaction view like we were showing. And what the voiding does is it creates a hidden reversing transaction in the background. And anytime you see those transactions, it's going to group those transactions together. So please note that voiding a transaction cannot be undone. So once it's voided, if you decide that you didn't want it voided, you would just have to re-enter the transaction that you voided. So if I void this transaction, it's just going to tell me that it's voided. Then I'll see a little like a no sign here on the left-hand side to let me know that it's been voided. And creating a recurrent transaction, say that this is a payment that Derek is going to receive every week or every 2 weeks, then I can click on that transaction, scroll down to make recurring, and I can give the recurring transaction a name. So this could be payroll for March. So how about I just switch this to payroll check for Derek. Then I can say when it's going to happen, and it could be every single month, and then it could be the first Friday, and then if he had another transaction, so if he gets paid twice a month, then I could create another one, and it could be the third Friday. So, and I could create one to reoccur to cover all of my bases at that point. So I'm just going to say the first Friday and click Save. Then once that recurrent transaction is created, when time comes for it to be generated, it'll show up here just like our gas bill or our electric bill. To review those transactions, you can go to the gear here at the top, and you can go down to recurring transactions, where you'll actually see all of your recurring transactions. And if you need to cancel one, you'll use the circle minus on the right to delete that transaction. And one question you may have is, what if you're not doing like a handwritten or printed out paper check? In those situations, if it's going to be an electronic check, you would use payment. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the PowerPoint presentation and ask, do you have any questions? If you do, you can definitely post those in our question box, and I'll go ahead and answer those. I do want to thank everybody for attending before anybody drops off. We truly hope that you enjoyed this class, and if you have any further questions outside of the question and answer session, you can definitely give us a call at the 1-800-346-6120, or you can email us at support@cts.cph.org. Okay.